Modi ji, Netanyahu, Xi Jinping, Putin, Trump exiting the stage. So what happens to the world when these guys exit?
When it comes to China, it's a very opaque system. Mr. Putin, I'm sure he has somebody in mind, maybe 2-3 people in mind, but he will not make it public. So that's a complete question mark over there also.
Who do you think is going to be a great alternative for Modi?
What are the qualities you want in the next leader who takes over charge of a country? So firstly, the leader needs to be young, reasonably young. Secondly, the leader needs to have significant experience already. If Mr. Rahul Gandhi potentially, hypothetically comes to power in the future, how much experience does he have in governing? China is a one-party state. Autocracy. North Korea, one-party system, autocracy. The US is a two-party system. No other party really matters, only the Republicans and the Democrat. In the case of Mr. Biden, only to divert attention of the world from where the real power lies. The real power lies somewhere else. Federal Reserve, which is the national bank, so to say, of the US, it is a private bank and no one really knows who the shareholders, stakeholders are in that bank.
Do you think US is still appropriately labeled as a superpower?
US 91, Russia around 50, China about 17-18, India about 5, 4.9, France is about 4.5. That's the real snapshot of the world. We are nowhere near being a superpower. From my perspective, you need global power projection capabilities, which means you should be in a position to intervene militarily anywhere on the globe at, let's say, 60 minutes notice. And today there's only one nation that fits that bill. It's the US.
What are the three things that India needs to do to be taken seriously at the global level and be a global superpower, say, let's say by 2050?
Historically, we have been seen as a punching bag. Because the Pakistanis unleashed wave after wave after wave of terror against us, and we just kept quiet. First of all, we need to stop tolerating terrorism from Pakistan.
So do you think that because of all this in the future, our youth population will thrive or collapse?
So our youth is our asset. We need to invest in our youth and we have to give our youth the best opportunities any young person can ask for. Imagine right now you have to learn Hindi, you have to learn English and you have to learn your mother tongue. 3 languages, then what else will you learn if you're spending so much time learning 3 languages? First thing, get rid of English. We should have an education system in our own mother tongue, and if you want a national language, it should be Sanskrit. Secondly, we need to have a great focus on science and technology.
What's India's biggest bottleneck or competition, sir? Is it US, China or India itself?
Corruption, reservations, and education system. Fix these 3 things, done. Nobody can stop us.
Namaste and welcome to this episode of the OddCast Show. As you all know, the OddCast Show is actually a platform for, 2 generations of a father and son to come together and talk about things that are odd but relevant. Today we have Abhijit Chavda sir with us once again in the studio, and we are blessed to have him. He brings to the table so many things apart from his experience, but his knowledge of the future is what we're trying to delve in today in today's subject.
This podcast is especially relevant to the youth today because by the year of 2030, we will be the unofficial workforce of India, and we will also be like representatives of the country worldwide. And this podcast will also let you know about the do's and don'ts of what to prepare for, what not to prepare for, and also how to prepare for it.
So, sir, I have so many questions to ask you, but I want to talk to you about a particular date, 2030.
Mm-hmm.
And 2030 is just not a date. It could be a pivotal moment in history. We are probably going to see a lot of the strong men of today, like, Modi ji, Netanyahu, Xi Jinping, Putin, Trump exiting the stage. So what happens to the world when these guys exit in 2030? What's it going to look like?
Yes, it's a very important point that you bring up because they're all in their 70s now, I would assume. I'm not sure about the exact dates, but they're all in the 70s. And generally, that's around the time that you start making plans for the transition phase. And when it comes to any great country, any great power, historically, we have seen with kingdoms and empires that the transition phase between 2 leaders is typically the most pivotal make or break moment for the continuity of the kingdom. Because if the transition happens in such a way that from a strong leader, a weak leader, let's say hypothetically, comes to power, then that kingdom, that empire typically declines.
Right.
And it can actually collapse if it doesn't go right. So it's going to be a very pivotal time when all these leaders start transitioning out of power, because eventually they will. Even Mr. Putin has been in power for almost 25 years in some form or the other. And right now, if you look at Russia's political scene, you don't quite sure, you don't know for sure who could be the next person in line. I'm sure Mr. Putin has thought of somebody, but we don't know who it could be. When it comes to India, we have some contenders, but we're still not quite sure how it is going to go, because India is a democracy and we never know what's going to happen in a democracy. In China, it's a little simpler, because it will be somebody from the Chinese Communist Party whenever it happens. So it's going to be a very pivotal phase. And like you say, by 2030, we will see these transitions most likely happening. And the world could, if it doesn't go right, the world could be in for a very turbulent phase of history. We are already going through a phase of significant and very rapid geopolitical realignment of the global geopolitical scene, of the balance of power situation. Typically, changes that happen over decades, we are seeing in weeks and months and years. Yeah, that's what we're seeing. So it's going to be a very different world probably in 2030. Right now, there's a new Cold War that is brewing geopolitically. For a long time, we had the 20th century Cold War, which ended with the collapse of the USSR. Then there was a unipolar moment where the US was the only great superpower in the world, that lasted about 20 years. Then with the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, you had China rising to the scene. Now, China is a very big economy, not as big as the US, but technologically they are almost out there. So right now there's a new Cold War brewing between the US and China. Mr. Trump is driving that through the trade and tariff situation. Mr. Trump is in his second term. So by 2029, he will be done. And then what happens? And what happens when Mr. Modi eventually, whenever he chooses, will demit power and so on. So it's going to be a very uncertain time. And that's what we have to look at. So I cannot make any predictions right now, but I can tell you that it's going to be a very different world, most likely in 2030. Mr. Netanyahu himself, who has been a very long-term part of the political scene and geopolitical scene from the Israel perspective, he too is getting older. And he too, I don't know if he will be around as a player in the political scene by 2030. So it's going to be a period of great transition. And from our perspective in India, we have always suffered from this political instability. Whenever there's an election, if the coalition government is thrown up, or if a new party comes to power, we often see that there is often a complete 180-degree turn in terms of policies. And policies that have been potentially working well for India may be reversed. And if that situation happens, then India's growth trajectory may change significantly. So a big phase of uncertainty. So that's what I would say is my opening statement. We are in for a phase of significant uncertainty in the next 5 years. 2030, around that time, it will be a different world. And a lot of technology will have changed by that time. I mean, technology is the driving force of progress and of geopolitical change. Right now, lots of new technologies are coming to the fore. AI, most people are not aware how big of a game changer it is, because we are seeing chatbots in AI. But when it comes to AI, it is at the forefront of, all the militaries in the world are integrating AI into their way of operating. For example, in the 3-day India-Pakistan war, I'm sure we used some AI-enabled equipment. For example, the Bofors gun that took down hundreds of Turkish drones. I'm sure there was an AI component there. I'm sure that when it comes to Indian kamikaze drones, there must have been an AI component there. And AI will be part of, wargaming various scenarios. Let's say you have a war in the future with some country, you're planning it, for example. How do you address various scenarios? Some scenarios are too complex to address, but if you have the AI advantage of very powerful AI at your disposal, you can think of every scenario and what you can do in that scenario. So the nations that will adopt AI will do really, really well. And the 2 or 3 nations that will be at the forefront of space exploration also in the world in this century will be the 2 or 3 nations that will decide the eventual long-term fate of humanity. And all of these changes will become very visible by 2030. So it's going to be a phase transition. A lot of old leaders will step down because of age. New leaders will come up. Will they be good enough to take on the mantle of leadership? And will technology become too big a factor? And will leadership become kind of irrelevant? Will there be extra political, extra democratic centers of power that kind of take control of a nation because of technology and make political leaders kind of irrelevant? That's also another question we have to address. So these are the big questions that are going to be posed to us by the time of 2030. It's going to be a period of great transition.
Right. But you mentioned that, in certain of these superpowers that already exist, there are already a second rung of leaders already being groomed, or, there are alternatives. And in India also, you mentioned that there are alternatives. Who do you think, who's your pick over there? Like, who do you think is going to, be a great alternative for Modi to carry on his legacy or try and, carry on his policies and implement them?
Right. So we have to ask ourselves that what are the qualities you want in the next leader who takes over charge of your country? First thing, that leader should be reasonably young. You don't want a 70-year-old coming to power. You want somebody who will be in the game for 20, 30 years. So ideally somebody around the age of 50. So that is not too young that you are inexperienced, like if you have 35. And at the age of 50, you are pretty young in politics and you have a long innings ahead of you. So firstly, the leader needs to be young, reasonably young, around 40, 45, 50, 55, around that age. Secondly, the leader needs to have significant experience already in governance and dealing with lots of issues. So if a leader comes to the scene who has never governed a city, never been a chief minister or whatever, then that person will be inexperienced and we don't know how well or poorly the person may perform. So you want a person with experience, significant experience. So the two qualities you need to have is youth, and secondly experience, and also an understanding of the global order is important. So from that perspective, we have some leaders in India. We obviously have Yogi Ji, who has been the chief minister of UP for quite some time and who has done very well, and who understands how politics is played and the game that is played, and who understands what the people need, what the country needs. So that is one, Mr. Yogi. There is Mr. Himanta Biswa Sharma. I'm talking about BJP people right now.
Sure.
So there is Mr. Himanta Biswa Sharma, who's also a very popular leader, who's also reasonably young. So these two I can think of. I'm sure there are other leaders also who could turn up as dark horses from the BJP perspective. From the non-BJP perspective, there's always Mr. Rahul Gandhi, who's definitely pretty young. I'm not sure how well experienced he is. I would ask myself that if Mr. Rahul Gandhi potentially, hypothetically comes to power in the future, how much experience does he have in governing and managing large sets of people and the responsibilities that come with that, large states and all. Unfortunately, I don't see him having that experience because he's never been a chief minister or something like that. So that's why there's a question mark from my perspective over Mr. Gandhi. I'm sure it's possible that he may be a great leader, but we haven't seen the proof of that. So from the non-BJP perspective, I don't see too many leaders right now in the fray who could be the right person to take over from Mr. Modi. So as of today, I may be wrong, but I can see Yogi Ji and Mr. Himanta Biswa Sharma. I'm sure Mr. Devendra Fadnavis is another great candidate who has a tremendous amount of experience in governing a gigantic state like Maharashtra and the bigger economy.
Jai Maharashtra.
All the problems and challenges that come with governing Maharashtra, and who has done a fantastic job. And he's also pretty young. So I would be remiss not to mention Mr. Devendra Fadnavis. I think he's a great candidate. So I think we have multiple candidates who could potentially be
who could step in the shoes. Step into the shoes.
Who could step into the shoes. So from India's perspective, we have that. When it comes to China, we have no idea. It's a very opaque system, right? It's a very opaque system. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes, behind the Iron Curtain or the Great Firewall of China. What's really happening behind the scenes? Mr. Xi Jinping, when he came to power, he was supposed to be the president for 10 years. But he has now made it a lifelong position, which means that he has sidelined a lot of the leaders who could have been his challengers within the Chinese Communist Party. So now essentially we have a situation in China where you have a bunch of yes men who report to Mr. Xi. Is that the best possible situation for choosing the next leader? Somebody who has been promoted because he says yes to Mr. Xi. That's not always a good situation. So whenever Mr. Xi steps down for whatever reason, somebody like that could come to power, which may not be the best thing from the Chinese national interest perspective. But we could be wrong. Perhaps a great leader could come to power. Mr. Putin, I'm sure he has somebody in mind, maybe 2-3 people in mind, but he will not make it public. So that's a complete question mark over there also. Israel, well, Mr. Netanyahu, how many other challenges does he have? He has a bunch of challengers, but how many of them could be really good enough to step into the shoes of being the leader of a very major power in the West Asia region? Right now, I'm not sure I can identify any individual person who I would say is the best choice from the Israeli national interest perspective. From the US, it's a very different scene. 4 years you're gone, maybe 8 years you're gone. Mr. Trump is in his second term, so definitely he's gonna have to step down after these 4 years. Who's next? If I was American, I would want somebody young to come to power. Somebody between the age of 40 to 50. You've had many American presidents who were pretty young. Barack Obama is a good example, who was not a great president, but who was a young man. President Kennedy was a young man, and he got 1963 because he went against the establishment.
Right.
So in the US, it actually doesn't really matter who's the president because you have it's an autocracy masquerading as a democracy. Let me tell you why I said that. Yeah, let me tell you why I said that. China is a one-party state, autocracy. North Korea, one-party system, autocracy. The US is a two-party system. No other party really matters, only the Republicans and the Democrats.
True.
These two parties, they have the same foreign policy, the same economic policy essentially. Internally, domestically, they have different policies, but at the geopolitical stage, they have the same policies, same foreign policy, same continuity. So the US is a uniparty, monoparty system masquerading as a vibrant democracy. And the president seems to exist, like in the case of Mr. Biden, only to divert attention of the world from where the real power lies. The real power lies somewhere else. It is an amorphous, very opaque kind of establishment system that they have, which is unelected, which is always in power. And somewhere there, the real power lies. For example, the Federal Reserve, which is the national bank, so to say, of the US, it is a private bank and no one really knows who the shareholders, stakeholders are in that bank. And that bank essentially owns the country and runs the country. So the US is a very opaque system. And the Chinese have sought to emulate the US. The Chinese actually, they may be the adversaries of the US. They want to replace and displace the US, but they hero worship the US. And they have, since the 1980s, tried to emulate everything the Americans have done. And that's why the Chinese have been so successful, because they themselves are an autocracy. So in the case of the US, once Mr. Trump goes, somebody else will come to power, but nothing much will change in the way the country is run. So yeah, so that's how I see the world going. Have you missed any country?
Not really, but you give me a lot of food for thought.
Yes, indeed.
So, sir, I wanted to ask that at the start you mentioned that there is a geopolitical global Cold War kind of situation going on.
Yes.
And with that and this sort of fatigue in the foreign policy generally, do you think US is still appropriately labeled as a superpower?
Great question. Is the US a superpower? Is China also a superpower? Could India be a superpower? What do we mean by superpower? So first of all, let me define what is my set of conditions for a nation to be a superpower.
Sure.
From my perspective, you need global power projection capabilities, which means you should be in a position to intervene militarily anywhere on the globe at, let's say, 60 minutes notice.
Okay.
From my perspective, that is the definition of a superpower. And today there's only one nation that fits that bill. It's the US. If the Chinese want to intervene in 60 minutes in Cuba, can they? If they want to intervene in the next 60 minutes in somewhere in Africa, can they? They can't. The Americans actually can do that, either directly or through one of their vassal states, right? So the Americans are the only superpower. Now, there's a lot of talk about the decline of the US these days. Okay, the US is in decline. I would say that the US has never been as powerful as it is today.
Okay.
It has never been militarily and economically as powerful as it is today. It controls the entire global system economically. Its currency is the backbone of the entire global economy. There's a lot of pushback right now happening because of the China-Russia understanding. But right now, if we take a snapshot of the world and see how the economy is run, it's all US. And militarily, the Americans have more than 700 extraterritorial military bases all across the world on other nations' territories. How many does China have? How many does India have? How many does Russia have? Nothing compared to the US.
Right.
The US has never been more powerful than it is today. Morally and societally, there is a decay in the nation. The quality of the society is declining. There is a lot of disaffection among the people in the country. There's a lot of job issues. There is inflation. There is moral decay. The fabric of society is breaking down. All of that is there. So societally and culturally, they are in decline. But as an empire, which it actually is, it has never been as powerful as it is today. But the fact that the society is declining can have an effect on the long-term outcome of an empire. So I think by 2030, the US will still be the number one, the top dog in the world. By 2050, you could see a change. But right now, I see the US as the only superpower. China doesn't come close to being competing with the US. When you put together hard power, all the elements of hard power, which is economic power, military power, power projection, number of nukes, your technological capabilities, if you add all of that together and you construct a score, 1 to 100, then the US has a score of about 91.
Wow.
China has a score of 17 or 18. Russia
Really?
has, yes.
It's 91 and 17, 18.
Yes. Russia has a score of about 50. So hard power perspective wise, Russia is actually way ahead of China. Why? Because they have the world's largest nuclear arsenal. Nobody can mess with them. Even China can't mess with them. So I would say top dog is the US, next is Russia, third is China. But long-term, China has a much bigger chance than Russia because of its technological prowess and its advancements. So that is the balance of world if you take a snapshot right now. US 91, Russia around 50, China about 17, 18, India about 5, 4.9. France is about 4.5. That's the real snapshot of the world. We are nowhere near being a superpower right now. That's the situation. But it could change very rapidly. By 2030, India could be at a different number. The US will still be the top dog. But China could be catching up with other nations and so on. So that's where we are today.
Okay, so you're saying that by 2030, US will still be the top dog, but after that, maybe much later, say 2050, we can probably see other things.
Significant change by that time, yes.
Right. So, how do you exactly see this play out for India? Do you think that we can, or even China can overtake America by that time?
China wants to. China wants that by the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party in them taking power in Beijing, which probably happened in 1949, if I'm not mistaken. So they want that by 2049, they should be the top nation in the world. And see, economically, they are about $19 trillion economy.
Okay.
The US is around $30 trillion. So that's in terms of the US dollar economy.
Yes.
But when it comes to technology, the Chinese have kind of almost caught up with the US, and they could turn that into a complete different kind of leverage, which could be a game changer. So the Chinese hope that by 2049 or thereabouts, they'll be in a position to replace and displace the US as the world's most powerful nation. And they are on a mission mode to do that. So they could probably do that by 2049, 2050. Which other nations are in the fray? The Russians, the great advantage Russia has is that they are an autarky. What does it mean? It means that they don't need to import anything from anywhere. They have all the raw materials they need, whether it is minerals, whether it's iron, whether it's copper, whether it is lithium, whether it's oil, whether it's gas, whether it's fertilizer, agriculture. Everything is there in the gigantic landmass. They don't have to depend on anybody else.
So nobody can technically bully them in that aspect.
Nobody can bully them. You can dump as many sanctions as you want on their economy. It won't affect them.
Right.
So that is the great insurance policy that they have. And that is something that is great for a nation in the long term, in the long run. So I think Russia will do reasonably well, assuming the transfer of power whenever it happens from Putin to whoever else happens. From India's perspective, we have a long road ahead of us. We are a $4.5 trillion economy. We will not be taken seriously until we are a $10 trillion economy. And we are very much on track, on course for achieving that. But we're going to need to do a lot of hard work. And what we will need is political stability and continuity. So whenever the transition happens from Mr. Modi to whoever else, nothing should change in terms of India's policies. Okay, that is one thing. Secondly, we have lots of issues internally,
right,
which we will need to fix. We'll not discuss the issues in a geopolitical kind of podcast, but we have internal issues that we need to fix. Okay,
right.
Yeah. But I think that India is the only large economy that has 0% chance of recession. And it's an economy that's projected to keep on growing at least 6-7% per year, hopefully,
Great.
for the next 20 years. If we do that, we'll be in a very good position. But we will still not be at the top rung at the US-China level. We'll be the third largest economy, but there'll be a gap between us and the top two. To bridge the gap, we have to become a technological power. We have to become a high-tech power. We have to become a leader at the forefront of all the big technologies, the crucial technologies like semiconductors, AI, and all that, and also space exploration. So that is something India will have to do, and India will have to, through that, improve the living standards of Indians and become a military power. We have to become independent in terms of military manufacturing, all kinds of manufacturing. We need to stop importing arms from other countries because it gives those countries leverage over us. So it's a long road ahead of us. We should not kid ourselves that we are on the road to being a superpower in the next 5-10 years. We are not. But I would say that by 2070, we could very well be the largest economy and the most powerful nation if we play the game right. Even by 2050, it's possible, right? So we're not going to be a superpower in 5-10 years. But by 2050, we could very well be among the top 2-3 nations in the world, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and to prepare for a less dominant United States of America in the very distant future, what else can India do? Because obviously China reaching that level or even bridging that gap may not always be the best for us in many ways, not just geopolitically. So how do you see that happening?
Right, that's a very good question. We discussed previously, India doesn't have any allies, but
Right.
India has a lot of well-wishers.
Yes.
We are one nation. As a big power, we have never bullied other nations. We have never colonized other nations. We have never exploited and ravaged other nations. We have
Yes.
always been good to others.
Yes.
So that is one. Even the Taliban doesn't hate India. Imagine that. Even the Taliban prefers India over Pakistan any day. Even the Iranians prefer Pakistan over India any day. Even the Gulf countries prefer India over Pakistan any day of the week. Right?
Right.
The African nations have a great amount of goodwill towards India. The Eastern Asian nations, Japan, Indonesia, all these nations, Mongolia, for example, they have a great amount of goodwill with us, towards us. We have cultural ties with them that go back thousands of years. So all this we can leverage. What we need to do is to position ourselves as the leader of the global South, and not through words but through actions. By having economic ties with all these nations, if we need various raw materials, we can import them from African nations. We can set up industries over there, which will benefit those nations. There, it will give rise to jobs in those countries. We can help them with infrastructure, with other things. So we can do things in a win-win manner, which will be beneficial for us as well as beneficial for them. So our economy grows. We have access to lots of different supply chains of raw materials and all the critical things that we need, which we may or may not have within India. And we also help other countries grow in the meanwhile.
Right.
And that way it's a win-win growth. And then when it comes to voting in the UN or whatever, we can have those countries with us. We can have some kind of understanding with them. So it gives us a huge amount of advantage. So that's the game we have to play. We have to play the long game. It's a patient game. It's a test match. It's not 2020. And we have to think about the fifth day. And that's the game we have to play.
Right.
So in the test match that you mentioned, it's a long-term game for India. What is, if I were to ask you to sum this up and say that, okay, what are the three things that India needs to do to be taken seriously at the global level and be a global superpower, say, let's say by 2050, as you mentioned?
Yeah. Great question. What are the three things India needs to do? What are the things we need to change? Things we have been doing in a certain way, we need to stop doing things that way. And which way do we need to do those things? First of all, we need to stop tolerating terrorism from Pakistan. Anytime there's a terror attack against India, it will happen. Unfortunately, Pakistan is never going to change. In the next 5 years, someday, there will be some terror attack from Pakistan. It's likely. I hope it doesn't happen, but it's likely. If that happens, we have to not tolerate it, first of all, and we have to hit them 10 times as hard. Historically, we have been seen as a punching bag because the Pakistanis unleashed wave after wave after wave of terror against us, and we just kept quiet. We just went on complaining and sending dossiers of information and evidence to them. Who cares? We did nothing. So that's number one. See, India always keeps complaining. We are not a permanent member of the UN Security Council. We don't have the veto power. Well, how do you get that veto power that you want? You have to convince the world that you have a veto irrespective of whether you have veto power or not, which means you can stop the world from proceeding. Veto means that my word is final and nobody can do a thing about it, which means that we have to be so powerful that we can actually make things happen on the ground even without a veto power. Only then they will actually give us a veto power. So that's one thing India has to do to be taken seriously. We have to stop being a soft power. We have to become a hard power. We have to show some teeth sometimes at those who deserve to be shown teeth. That's number one. That needs to happen. That will take a change of mindset, not a change of economy. We are already economically and militarily powerful enough to do this. But it takes a change of mindset. So Mr. Modi is demonstrating that mindset now, that we now have a new doctrine. And there will be no compromises with national security. Blood and water can't flow together. Talks and terror can't happen together. And if Pakistan does something, we're going to make them pay for it going forward. Indus Waters Treaty, end of story. So we have changed the game now. And this has to continue. That's number one. Number two, we have to economic progress has to be non-negotiable. India has to, and the best way to become an economic power is through manufacturing. Right now, the whole world is looking for alternatives beyond China. Right? Everybody wants to move out of China, and the Chinese are forcing companies to either share their technology or move out. Right? So the world wants to move away from China. The only nation that has the bandwidth, the capacity, the scale to replace China is India. But the problem is that we don't roll out the red carpet for investors in India. We make things very difficult for them. That needs to change. Ease of doing business, ease of investing has to be there in India. If we do that, if we become a manufacturing power, it doesn't have to be high-tech manufacturing. We should be the biggest exporter of spoons and forks and nuts and bolts and everything you can imagine. You do that, then your economy will grow at scale. And with economic growth comes military growth because you can invest more in the military. So number two is economic growth. That needs to happen. And third, obviously, we have to become technologically independent completely. When it comes to jet engines, which is a big issue these days. Yeah. So we have a deal with the Americans for jet engines, supply of jet engines for the Tejas fighter planes. And they have been dragging their feet on that. We have paid the money, but the jet engines aren't coming. Maybe two a year will come. What will we do with 2 jet engines a year? So it is an Achilles heel of India, jet engine technology. So we will have to somehow or the other buy, beg, borrow, steal, doesn't matter. get jet engine technology from outside, at the same time continue developing the Kaveri engine indigenously.
Right.
It has to happen in parallel. And the same goes for everything else. We have to become completely self-sufficient in all the critical technologies, and we have to become a world leader in that. Don't we have the brains for that? It's our brains that are working in the field of AI, in the field of space technology in the US. If you look at all the big companies in the US, technological companies, it's Indians who are at the core of the companies as well as the leadership positions of the companies. So we need to make the climate, the situation in India conducive to bring talent back to India and stop the brain drain. And we need to provide opportunities to our great talents. Right now, the system, the educational system, the academic system is such that it identifies, it seeks out, identifies, and destroys talent and forces them to go abroad. We have to have the other approach, the opposite approach. We need to seek talent and give them and reward talent. We need to become a meritocracy. We need to be so attractive that even foreign talent will want to come to India. So these changes need to happen. If we do it's not difficult to make this happen.
I'm sure. And I think you've summed it up very well, because the three things you mentioned is, one is, change in thought process, while keeping the policy constant. The second thing is about, just improving our economy and making sure that it's non-negotiable while we invest in our economy and keep growing it. And the third thing you mentioned is about technology. But you also have touched upon space exploration. So where does space exploration fit into all this?
Right.
And why does that matter?
Yes. It's very important. Let me explain why. Right now, the only nation in the world that has the ability to within the next 1 year put people on the moon, it's the US. By 2035, they will have people on Mars. Now, what will happen? See, it's not a short-term thing I'm talking about. By 2100, imagine that the Americans own the moon and they own Mars also. Then they have access to so many resources that our people are deprived of. They control who goes to the moon, who goes to Mars, who works there, who comes back, etc. If you want to go to Mars, we will need an American visa. Right? We will need a SpaceX visa or an Elon Musk visa if you want to go to the moon. So in the future, by 2100, we will not be around. Our descendants will be around. We want them to have the best opportunities to do whatever they want in the world, and the world will have expanded by that time. It will be a multi-planetary world possibly. The moon will be a place where people go to do business. Mars will be a place where people go to do business, and there will be lots of resources that the world will be exploiting in Mars. And if we don't take the right steps right now, we will be relegated to a backwater of the world by 2100. So it's a long-term game. Today, it doesn't matter. Today, but what we do today is going to determine what happens tomorrow. If in the 1960s, 70s, we did not make ISRO, we would be nowhere in the world. We would have to depend on the Americans or the Russians or the Chinese to put a single satellite in space.
Yeah.
We would not be able to put military satellites in space because they would refuse to launch military satellites. And then the war may have taken a whole different direction, the 3-day war that just happened, because we have assets in space that tell us what's happening. So if we had not invested in ISRO, if we had not invested in the nuclear program in the 20th century, we would not be in this tremendous position that we are in today, which keeps us safe, which keeps us secure. So if we don't make the right investments in ISRO and in the space industry today, by 2100, we will be in a complete backwater situation where we will be not taken seriously, and our people will not have the agency that human beings need to have, which is why space exploration is very important. It's the future of humankind. And the 2 or 3 nations that will rule space exploration in the world in this century will be the 2 or 3 nations that will determine the future of humanity. We have to make sure we are not left behind. We are kind of slow in this matter right now, and that's frustrating.
So, sir, we were discussing off camera yesterday that India will have a very big youth population in the future, and it already does have such a big youth population now. So, do you think that because of all this in the future, our youth population will thrive or collapse?
India has probably, the biggest youth population today in the world. And the youth is the driving force of the economy. It's the vital force that drives a nation, a civilization.
Right.
So we have to be very protective of our youth, and we have to invest in our youth. Now, going forward, it looks like India's birth rates are kind of dropping.
Yes.
So for a population to remain stable at the current number, you need to have a total fertility rate of 2.1, which means a number of 2.1 children on average per woman in the population. So right now our TFR has dropped to 2.0. In some states it is 1.5, 1.7. So our population growth rate is also declining. Now a lot of people will rejoice that we have our population is too large and it needs to come down.
Yes.
But if it comes down too quickly, then what happens is that the population grows old very rapidly.
Right.
And then you are in a situation where the average person is 60 years old.
Oh.
Then the entire vitality of the nation is gone. That's what's happening in Japan. That's what will happen in South Korea. That's what's happening in China. In China, the TFR is 1.1 or something, which is an absolute disaster.
Right.
They're staring at a demographic disaster down the line. By 2100, their population will be 700 million, half of what it is today, and the average age will be 65. So who will drive the industries? Who will go on the border to fight wars? China is in a very bad scenario right now. We have to ensure that, yes, I agree, our population needs to come down. It needs to come down to maybe 600 million. But we have to give it 200 years for that to happen.
Absolutely.
If we make it happen too fast, then we will be in the same situation that China has brought itself in. They had a one-child policy, which looked like a great success. But today we are realizing it was a disaster for China.
Yes.
So that needs to happen. So our youth is our asset. We need to invest in our youth. We have to bring down the population. We have to do it slowly. And we have to give our youth the best opportunities any young person can ask for, which means job opportunities and multiple job opportunities. Today, what you have is that most youth in this country, they are happy if they can find one job in their life. Okay, some kind of career, but it's never the career they wanted. They get stuck in some career that they never wanted.
Right.
Most of them don't have the privilege of coming from rich families or whatever. So they end up in some job and they have to spend 50 years or whatever of their life just slogging over there without ever being happy.
Right.
In a good, thriving, prosperous civilization, you need to have people who have multiple opportunities and who go into the best possible thing for them. So we need to create that scenario in India where everybody has multiple opportunities. And some in the US, for example, it's very common for people to have multiple careers. You spend 2 years in a restaurant as a waiter, then you have 2 years as a car mechanic, then you become a marine, then you become a business person. 4 totally different, completely disconnected careers. In India, you don't get that opportunity. So we need to give these opportunities to our youth through by expanding the economy and by having all kinds of economic sectors thriving and booming in the country. So that will take time, but that's what we need for our youth.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you said that based on this, the youth will be like a deciding factor on how instrumental they really are in this entire global superpower race among the couple of countries you mentioned previously. However, there are so many issues with the youth that you mentioned, that they'll be stuck in some careers here or there that they may never be happy with. So do you think that our youth in the future will be more reliant on innovation or imitation?
That will all depend on the quality of the education system. So if the education system gives them the skills, the most important skill in today's day and age is the ability to learn new things rapidly. And in India, we don't teach kids to learn. We teach kids to memorize and to just obey what the teacher says.
Yes.
The best student from a teacher's perspective is the obedient student.
Yes.
Not the one who asks questions. This attitude has to change. It is the education system that determines the quality of your population. We have the best brains in the world. A 3-year-old could be the most curious and happy child in the world. But by the time that kid is 15 years old, we have smashed all the curiosity, all the happiness out of the kid.
Absolutely.
And put these huge burdens on his or her back.
Right.
Of memorizing millions of things.
Yes.
So we need to change the system. If we empower our kids, what's the purpose of the education system? To turn out high quality, confident, capable young kids who can go and change the world. That's the purpose of the education system. We are doing the exact opposite. We are lobotomizing them. So that needs to change. If we can fix the education system, nobody will be able to stop us. We'll have the best quality population in the world. We have had a history of thousands of years of churning out the greatest geniuses in the world. Brahmagupta, Ramanujan, so many names come to mind.
Right.
Panini, the names are endless. Why don't we produce them today? We keep on harping on as slogans about Vishwaguru, but we are doing nothing to change it. We are today a Vishwa Coolie nation. We are a Vishwa student nation. We are learning from others.
Right.
We should be the source of knowledge. It will never happen without changing the education system. If we change that, then India will be unleashed. The real power of India's youth will be unleashed. I have the highest belief in the potential of the people of India. We are the most intelligent people in the world, but we have been saddled with this colonial education system which needs to go. If we can fix that, nobody will be able to stop India.
Absolutely.
But what's a quick fix, sir, here? I mean, like, what's a short-term, long-term fix for the education system in India? Like, are you hinting at, going back to the Gurukul Parampara?
No, the Gurukul Parampara cannot happen today because our population is too large. The Gurukul Parampara can happen only in small populations. Even in 1980, our population was 600 million. Today it's 1.4 billion, like 2.5 times that, almost. So with such a large population, you can't have the Gurukul Parampara. What we can do is not try and reinvent the wheel, just look at what has succeeded for other nations. The Chinese have succeeded. In 1990, the Chinese education system was just as abysmal as ours. Today, it is one of the best in the world because they spent trillions of dollars in revamping the education system and imitating what the world had done, the best of what the world had done. And they essentially tried to copy the best of that the Americans had to offer. So what we need to do is to create a system that is not a replication of the old Gurukul system, but a replication of what has succeeded and what has worked for the other countries. So we need to have a system in which kids are taught what is important, not 3 different languages. Imagine right now you have to learn Hindi, you have to learn English, and you have to learn your mother tongue. 3 languages, then what else will you learn if you're spending so much time learning 3 languages? First thing, get rid of English, the foreign language. We should have an education system in our own mother tongue, and if you want a national language, it should be Sanskrit. Because it is the language of intelligence. It makes you more intelligent if you learn it. Secondly, we need to have a great focus on science and technology. So these things will not happen overnight. There's no short-term fix to it. You start with the lowest level, with the nursery. So it has to be a 20-year plan in which in 20 years you bring the changes to all levels of the education system. It will take at least 20 years. But you've got to start somewhere.
But it's doable.
It's very much doable.
All right. So, sir, we talked about so many countries and so many possibilities in 2030, when so many strongmen are exiting. Like, we talked about the US, we talked about China, we talked about Russia, we talked about Israel, we talked about India, but we missed out on Europe. Now, where do you see Europe over here, as a continent? Like, let's not talk individually on each country there, but, maybe as a EU, or European Union, where do they stand in the global superpower race?
Yes, great question.
And I'm going to get to, the reasons of why they're declining, but where are they now?
Where are they now? The European nations are a reasonably important economic bloc right now, and a reasonably important military bloc. So in Europe, especially Western Europe, we have 2 entities. One is the EU, and the other is NATO. And many nations are part of both coalitions, EU as well as NATO. So if you look at Europe today, the real power in Europe, in Western Europe, is the US. It's not any European nation.
Really?
None of the European nations is sovereign. They have lost their sovereignty. When you become a member of the EU, for example, European Union, what happens? You lose control over your economy because you cannot use your own currency. You have to use the euro, which is a rebranded Deutsche Mark. So that is one. Secondly, you lose control over your national integrity, which means you lose control over your borders. You cannot decide who comes in, who goes out, and who stays in your country. Third, you lose control over your military because if you are part of NATO, because then your military comes under the NATO command, not the prime minister or president of your country.
Correct.
And fourthly, you lose control over your internal policies. What policies will be implemented in your country, that will be determined from Brussels. So if you are a member of EU, you have lost all political sovereignty to Brussels, which is controlled by the Washington DC. If you are a member of NATO, you have lost your military sovereignty to NATO High Command, which is again controlled from Washington. So if you look at Europe today, the nations are merely puppets or vassals of the United States, of all the European nations, EU as well as NATO nations. And the real power in Europe, in Western Europe, is the United States. So today it is an important economic bloc with a single currency, so it matters, but it is declining. The EU is being slowly deindustrialized. They are giving up their nuclear capabilities, nuclear power capabilities. Germany has shut down its nuclear reactors. They're going back to coal now. And they had this cheap flow of gas and energy that was coming in from Russia. They've shut that also. So when you lose access to cheap power, your industry will die. And that's what's happening. Lots of European economies are going into recession. Most of them are not doing well. So the EU is declining. And by 2050, I don't see the EU playing any big role in the world. By 2030, it will still be relevant. And they will still believe that they are at the center of the world. But it's a process of slow decline that we are seeing right now. The EU and the NATO nations, the European nations will very quickly, 20, 30 years, become the backwater of the world. And the real action will be in Asia.
Who would have thought that?
Yeah, well, it's been engineered. It's been, deliberately engineered this way. The Americans have done that.
But do you see, sir, the open border policies that they're dealing with, or they're trying to deal with, has that been one of the prime reasons for their decline so suddenly?
the decline of the economy is because of the energy factors. But when it comes to the societal decline, well, when you import millions of military-age men, only men, not women. See, they are saying that we are bringing refugees into our country because they are dealing with terrible conditions back home. So why only military-age men? When I think of refugees, I think of women and children, helpless women and children. But it's only military-age men who are coming in, and only from certain parts of the world, West Asia, Middle East, certain African nations, and so on. So it is actually a deliberate strategy to re-engineer the demographic, cultural, situation in various European nations.
Or the soul of Europe. Why would they agree to this? Why would they agree to this open? Like, if it's being engineered, who's engineering it, and why are they agreeing to it?
So let's say I am the
what power does the engineer have over this to get this engineered?
Right. So let's say I am the leader of Germany. Let's say. So I'm a member of NATO. I'm a member of the EU. So the EU High Command will decide what happens in my country. I no longer have control over the destiny of my country. So the EU High Command from Brussels, sitting over there, will say, okay, every country will have to absorb a certain quota of refugees every year. So you have to abide by that. So the EU High Command is deciding how many refugees, military-age men, come into each country every year. And they are forcing these countries to absorb these refugees, even though the population most likely doesn't want that. Right? So it is being engineered through the EU, through the EU High Command, which reports to Washington. It looks like, I believe that whenever the Americans think about a strong Europe, they think of the Hugo Boss uniforms and the marching boots of the Nazis. And they want to end that once and for all. So what was the USP of the Nazis? It was that the Germans were the master race, the superior race,
Right.
the Überman, right? But if the race itself gets changed, then where's the superior race, master race? Then that problem is gone forever.
Yeah, it's forever.
Yeah, so that's what's happening in Europe, in various parts of Europe. Europe is being completely destroyed demographically. There's a demographic invasion that's happening. It's happening in Ireland. It's happening in the UK. It's happening in every EU nation. And I'm sure the population of these nations, the populations are very unhappy with it, but they have no say in this. There's no democracy in the EU. There's no democracy there.
But it just confuses me or boggles my mind that, they can see it happening in front of their eyes. They can see the demographic change happening there. Isn't there someone who can step up and put an end to this? Do you think that there is any one, person or any one nation who can step up and, call a spade a spade?
So there are a couple of nations. Hungary is one, which has refused to take Poland also. These two nations. So Poland right now is the next nation after Ukraine which will take the brunt of a hypothetical future Russian invasion. So Poland is being given special status. They are being turned into a military superpower right now by NATO and by the Americans. So Poland is okay. Hungary has refused. Poland and Hungary have both refused to take refugees, which is why they have to pay millions of dollars of fines per day to the EU. Because they are not accepting refugees. So some small nations, reasonably small nations, are trying to resist this, but most nations are not resisting. Now, why is that the case? It's because the leaders of most nations are compromised. They have made sure, they have engineered the system in such a way that no real strong leader comes to power in any of these nations, a leader who genuinely represents the people of the nation. If you look at the UK, the prime ministership of the UK is a revolving door matter.
Yeah.
Every few months, a new prime minister who does nothing. It's just a mask. And every day a new face comes in the mask and goes away. You had Rishi Sunak, now you have Keir Starmer. In the past, you have, I don't know how many presidents came, prime ministers came and went. They do nothing. They mean nothing. They represent nothing. They're just there to follow orders. And that's the case in the case of most European nations. Except for France, perhaps, but even with France, there are issues. But if you look at all the European nations, I think France is the one nation that has the most quasi-independent foreign policy. They have their own nuclear deterrent, which is independent of the US, and so on. So they are the most independent, most sovereign of the nations, but not fully sovereign again.
What about Giorgia Meloni, sir, and Italy? Where do they fit into all this? Because she's been pretty vocal about these policies, and she's been trying to, put a stop or stem the flow of immigrants coming into the country. At least that's what the media tells us. Now, what's the truth? We don't know. But what do you think of her?
Right. So when we want to judge the actual performance of a leader, we have to disregard their words and look at their actions. So many leaders are very vocal and they become the darlings of the media. I'm sure Giorgia Meloni is a very, very strong, capable leader. And I'm sure she means well. I'm sure that she wants Italy to be free of all the immigrants and all that. But has she been able to deport any substantial number of immigrants? I don't think so. So that's the answer.
So you
Disregard
think
the words, look at the actions.
So you think Europe is a lost cause?
I think Europe is a lost cause. Unless that everything changes overnight, which is very unlikely to happen.
All right, great.
So, sir, coming back to the conversation regarding youth, I just wanted to know on behalf of the youth that why exactly should they be listening to this conversation with so much focus? Like, what value does this add in their lives?
Right. The youth is the future of the world.
Yes.
And we have a Gen Z population that is going to be the future of humanity
Yes,
right now. And a significant portion of India's youth is part of that cohort.
Right.
So why does all of this matter? Why should they pay attention to this discussion? Because it's going to affect their lives. If there is chaos potentially, hypothetically, in the world in 2030, then if they watch this conversation, they could be prepared for it. Let's say there's going to be economic turmoil 5 years down the line. So if you are aware of it, that this could be coming down the line in the future, then you can take precautions. You can take precautions to safeguard your family from economic turmoil. You can take precautions to safeguard your career from economic turmoil. Let's say there is technological turmoil coming up, and you can no longer send your kids to the West for education.
Yes.
Then what should you do about it? You should think about these things from now itself. Right now, we're hearing that the Americans are now scrutinizing every visa application with a threefold intensity.
Absolutely.
They are making it mandatory for students to give all their social media accounts
Yes, sir.
before they are given a visa. So they are looking at every person with great amount of scrutiny, and they're going to be very likely to reject most visa applications now. So historically, we in India, we have wanted to send kids to the West to study. Now that may no longer be a choice possibly in the future.
Yes.
So what should we do about it? So this is all going to affect us. Things that are happening across the world on the other side of the planet are also going to have repercussions over here in India. And that's why it's very important that we should be aware, we should be able to anticipate what may be coming down the line. In the future, India will be rising more, which means that the West will hate India even more, possibly.
Yes.
Which means that they will impose various kinds of restrictions on Indians to prevent Indians from accessing the West or potentially all kinds of other things. So we should be aware of it. We should be able to anticipate that given this scenario, this thing could happen. And
Right.
that's why it's very important for today's Gen Z, today's youth to listen to such conversations and be aware of what's happening beyond our borders. It's very
Right.
important.
Agreed.
Wonderful, sir. So I'm just going to quickly jump into the last segment, which is our rapid fire round, which we've introduced very, very recently. So I'll start, and these are just quick answers. So one global leader you think will dominate the 2030s?
Right now, it's very hard to see a global leader who will dominate the 2030s because all the leaders that matter today are in their 70s. And we are not sure who's going to come after them. Whether it's India, whether it's Russia, whether it's the US, whether it's China, whether it's Israel. I don't know. And the European nations like Monsieur Macron, etc., they don't really matter as much given the long-term direction the world is taking right now. So that's why 2030 is a big mystery. I don't know which leader is going to dominate. I'm not able to make a prediction.
Okay. All right.
Will China rise or fall by 2030?
Or China will be in a good position by 2030. They may be an even bigger competitor to the US by 2030. But by 2050, it may be a different story. But by 2030, I think China will be in an even stronger position than it is today.
Okay.
What's the one superpower you would name who's in decline? US, China, or Europe?
Europe is very much in decline, but it's not a superpower. The US is in decline societally. The society is in decline. Wokeism and whatnot, all those issues that they have engineered themselves in their society, they are now coming home to roost. But as an empire, when it comes to military might, they are at the peak of their power.
Right.
One reform India must take to become a global shaper.
We have to reform the education system. It is non-negotiable. You may become a $20 trillion economy, but if the quality of your education is garbage, then your population will not be able to cope with what the world brings to it. We need to reform the education system. It is an imperative.
Absolutely.
What's India's biggest bottleneck or competition, sir? Is it US, China, or India itself?
It is India itself. It is corruption. Corruption, reservations, and education system. Fix these three things, done. Nobody can stop us.
Who do you think is our main strategic ally in the future?
We don't have any strategic allies, but we have a tremendous amount of goodwill among all the downtrodden nations in the world. All the nations that have been exploited by the West and by other powers, they are all well-wishers of us because we have always stood by their side, whether verbally or through deed. And that's the goodwill we need to leverage going forward. We need to position ourselves not through words, but through actions as the leader of the global South. And that can turn into a great asset for us.
one Indian policy that could change the global narrative for us?
One Indian policy. I think it's going to have to be in technology, either in the field of AI, in the field of semiconductors, or in the field of space exploration. So if India becomes a space launching power and we develop the ability to launch hundreds of satellites in one go, then we could become a gigantic competitor to Starlink. Why can't we have our own Starlink-like constellation that is technologically better than Starlink and give a better alternative, a cheaper alternative? That's just one example. I think India has to, if India was to challenge the West, we have to do it technologically.
2030 youth, innovators, imitators, or influencers?
Right now, it is going to be imitators and influencers. Unless we change the education system, we will never be innovators.
Fair enough.
2030, sir, as you mentioned, is a very important date. What would India be then? Would it be a bridge, a buffer, or a boss?
India will not be a boss yet. India will be definitely a bridge between East and West. And we don't want to be anybody's buffer. So in 2030, India will be a bridge, and that will be a great role to play. But we will not be the boss yet. We have to wait a little bit more for that.
All right. I agree.
One word to describe the entire global order in 2030.
Turmoil. I see turmoil in 2030. It's going to be very unstable.
Okay.
I hope I'm wrong.
Yes.
Well, sir, I think that was wonderful. Like, again, as always, chatting with you, 1 hour has gone by and we didn't even notice. So it's been wonderful. And thank you so much for being on our show as usual. If there was some odd advice that you want to give to the youth, youth for 2030 to prep themselves up, what's it?
Yeah. What I would say to the youth is be comfortable becoming uncomfortable. Place yourselves in uncomfortable positions where you are challenged, where your comfortable life is challenged, and learn how to learn how to adapt rapidly, learn how to acquire new skills as rapidly and as excellently as possible. That's the one skill you need. Be comfortable getting uncomfortable.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for watching this episode. I think this episode was loaded with information and knowledge, and I think that 2030 is going to be a very, very pivotal time in our history of mankind. There's a lot of uncertainty around it, but Abhijit Chavda sir has been very kind enough to shed so much of light on this subject. While there is a situation of turmoil that we see or anticipate in 2030, it also gives us a lot of opportunities, especially for India to grow and for the Indian youth to grow. And I think that, this was a wonderful podcast. Thank you so much, sir. And if you all like this episode, please like, share, subscribe to our content. Thank you so much.